When my Uncle Ray passed, I thought all I'd inherit were his dusty old rifles, and maybe that stubborn mule he swore could outsmart any man. What I didn't expect was the deed to his entire ranch. 45 acres of rolling hills, a red barn, straight out of a painting, and a porch that caught the golden hour just right. It was quiet here, peaceful. The kind of quiet that settles in your bones after years of traffic noise and elevator dings. I'd spent too long choking on city smog and office politics, and now, finally, I had air I could breathe. The ranch didn't come with much, just memories and open space. But I brought in some goats, rescued a dog from the shelter, and started fixing up the place myself. No more neighbors stacked on top of each other. Just me, the animals, and the kind of silence you can only find when the nearest gas station is 20 minutes out. Then she showed up. Blonde bob, clipboard in hand, heels sinking into the dirt like they didn't belong. Deborah, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She barely introduced herself before declaring, "You owe the HOA $150,000 in retroactive dues. We expect payment within 30 days. I blinked, thought she was joking. I'm sorry, what? Her smile was tight, cold. Your property is within HOA jurisdiction. You've been living here without paying your share. That's theft. I told her flat out. This ranch was here before your HOA ever existed. I didn't agree to anything. She didn't flinch, just handed me a letter and strutted off like she owned the place. I looked at the paper, $150,000. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be a peaceful retirement. The moment Deborah left, I marched straight to my office, pulled out the old file cabinet Uncle Ray kept under lock and key, and dug through decades of paperwork. The man wasn't exactly organized. Everything smelled like tobacco and motor oil. But sure enough, near the bottom, I found the original deed to the property. No mention of an HOA, not even a whisper. Just a hand-drawn property line and a bold, typewritten note. Private independent parcel, exempt from any and all future zoning associations unless explicitly joined in writing. That seemed pretty damn clear to me. Still, just to be sure, I drove into town the next day and paid a visit to the county clerk's office. Nice gal behind the desk, Marcy. Looked up the parcel number and confirmed what I already suspected. Your uncle's property predates the Oak Ridge HOA by almost 40 years, she said, sipping her iced tea. You're not on their map. Never have been. Then why is their president threatening me with fines and back payments? She just shook her head. She's done this before, mostly to elderly folks who don't know better. Bullies don't always carry baseball bats. I thanked her and headed back, feeling a mix of relief and anger. But that didn't last long. The very next morning, I woke up to find 3 neon orange violation notices zip-tied to my gate. Fines listed $500 for unapproved fencing material, $200 for unauthorized livestock, my goats, $2,000 for non-compliant barn coloration. The damn barn, painted the same fire truck red it had been since 1964. Deborah showed up again that afternoon, this time with a digital camera in hand, snapping photos like she was on safari. You can't just make up rules, I told her, trying to stay calm. I'm not part of your HOA, she crossed her arms, smug as ever. That's what you think. But when a community changes, responsibilities change. Your uncle benefited from the roads, the landscaping, the street lighting. The roads. Lady, I've got a gravel driveway I pay to maintain myself. She ignored me, continued with her rehearsed speech like a robot malfunctioning in broad daylight. I'm giving you one more chance to settle this amicably. If not, we'll pursue legal remedies, liens, lawsuits, foreclosure if necessary. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was talking like I was squatting on land she personally owned. You're out of line, I said, stepping forward. I don't owe you a dime, and I've got the paperwork to prove it. She leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. You're freeloading, and I don't tolerate freeloaders. You may have tricked the system, but I will get what's owed. Then she turned and walked off, again, with that same smug strut. Like she'd already won, but she hadn't won. Not yet. At first, I thought the storm had passed. Deborah hadn't shown her face in a couple of days, and I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, she realized she'd picked the wrong ranch to mess with. I was wrong. It started with a quiet click one morning, barely audible over the cluck of my chickens. I followed the sound and spotted it. A motion-activated camera mounted to a telephone pole, aimed dead center at my front porch. 2 more popped up the next day, one pointed at my barn, another facing my driveway. All 3 wired to a solar power pack and marked with tiny HOA stickers. They were spying on me. I called the sheriff's office, but they shrugged it off. "They're technically not on your property," the deputy said, chewing his gum like he was timing out a nap. "As long as the cameras don't cross the fence, it's legal." Legal or not, it felt like I was living under a microscope. Then came the notices. Bright pink, bold letters. Violation, unauthorized agricultural activity, improper signage, unsafe structure, condemnable. Each. One printed with the Oak Ridge HOA letterhead, taped to my barn door, my mailbox, even the damn feed silo. Every day I'd peel off a new one, and every day I'd get angrier. And then they started trespassing. SUVs with tinted windows would drive by slow 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes they'd stop right in front of the gate. A couple of them even had the audacity to walk onto my land under the excuse of inspections. I caught one guy, pudgy, bald, and sweating like a sinner in church, measuring the distance between my fence and the road. "Step 1 more foot and you'll meet my post-hole digger," I said, gripping it like a baseball bat. He scampered off, without a word. But Deborah? She doubled down. I got a formal letter from the HOA board, signed by her and her 2 cronies, people I'd never even met. It said, unless I paid $150,000 in dues and fines within 30 days, they would place a lien on my property. That ranch was my life now, my uncle's legacy. I wasn't about to let some bored suburban tyrant steal it with printer paper and intimidation tactics. I tried one last time to reason with her. Met her in front of the post office, handed her copies of my deed, the county, clerk's records, everything. She didn't even look at them. Instead, she wrinkled her nose and sneered. "You're just another piece of hillbilly trash squatting on land you don't deserve. We're civilizing this community and you're standing in the way." That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not rage, not fear, resolve. I started asking around, talking to the older folks in town. That's when the stories came out. How Deborah had pushed a 78-year-old veteran to sell after slapping him with $50,000 in fake landscaping violations. How she'd bullied a widowed schoolteacher into foreclosure with fines for non-regulation porch furniture. This wasn't just about me, it was a pattern, a racket, and I wasn't going to be another one of her victims. I was going to be her reckoning. I'd had enough. That ranch wasn't just my home, it was my legacy, and no clipboard queen was going to intimidate me off my own land. So I got to work. The first step was digging deeper into paperwork. I unearthed everything Uncle Ray ever filed. Survey maps, plat records, even a handwritten letter from the original township commissioner, noting that our land was explicitly exempt from any zoning changes unless voluntarily opted in. Cross-referenced it with county filings and pulled up a legal ruling from 2009, where a judge had ruled in favor of another property owner who fought off the same HOA. Different board, same predatory tactics. Armed with that, I found a local property lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Marta who didn't flinch when I handed her the stack of documents. "They've got no jurisdiction here," she said flatly. "They step foot on your land again, that's criminal trespass." She drafted a formal cease and desist, addressed directly to Deborah and the Oak Ridge HOA board. Certified mail, return receipt, the whole 9 yards. But I didn't stop there. Installed trail cams all around the perimeter, tucked beneath branches, nailed to fence posts, even one hidden in an old birdhouse by the gate. Every trespass, every inspection, every HOA car that rolled too close, I got it on tape. Each time it happened, I filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's department and forwarded a copy to the county legal office. At first, the responses were lukewarm. But once I attached timestamps and license plate numbers, they started paying attention, and the more I dug, the less alone I felt. One morning, I knocked on the door of Mr. Halverson, the old mechanic down the road. Turns out Deborah had fined him $6,000 for non-compliant garage roofing. He'd paid it out of fear of losing his home. That broke something in me. I went door to door, talked to farmers, retirees, young couples trying to get by. Deborah had hit at least a dozen of them with fraudulent fees, all under the same smoke and mirrors HOA threat. That night, I invited 6 of them over for coffee and pie. "We've all been fighting her alone," I said, laying the papers out on the table. "But that's how she wins, divide and conquer. It ends now. We fight as one." Heads nodded, fists clenched. We weren't just mad anymore. We were organized. There's a special kind of satisfaction in baiting a trap and watching the predator walk into it with both eyes wide open. I planned the neighborhood meeting like I was throwing a backyard barbecue, which technically I was. We had burgers on the grill, country music on the speakers, hay bales for seating. But I also had 3 things Deborah wouldn't expect. Local news crew from Channel 4, 2 county officials from the zoning department. 3 hidden cameras, all recording. I sent out handwritten invitations to every homeowner in the area, especially the ones Deborah had bullied. Just a neighborly get-together, I wrote. Come hungry. By 2 p.m., my yard was full. Folding chairs circled the fire pit, people chatted over sweet tea, and the tension, though unspoken, was electric. Then, right on cue, a black Escalade screeched up to my gate, and out stormed Deborah in her pearls and pencil skirt, lips tight. With suspicion. She didn't RSVP, of course, but I knew she'd come. She marched up like she owned the place, eyes darting around. "What is this?" she snapped. "A secret HOA meeting?" I smiled. "Nope, just a barbecue." "You didn't get this approved through the board." "There's no board for me to go through," I said, stepping aside so the cameras could catch her face. "This is private property, has been for 60 years. That's when she saw the easel I had set up by the barn, displaying the original deed, my property survey, the exemption clause, and a blown-up copy of the cease and desist letter Marta sent her. Deborah's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't mean anything. You're still within Oak Ridge jurisdiction." One of the county zoning officials, a tall man in khakis and a worn ball cap, stepped forward and said calmly, "No, ma'am. I pulled the parcel myself this morning. This land is not, and has never been part of Oak Ridge's HOA. It's legally exempt, fully documented." The reporter leaned in closer, catching every word on camera. Another official nodded. "Any enforcement action against this property is not only baseless, it's potentially criminal," the crowd murmured. Cameras rolled. Deborah turned beet. "Red. You've all been lied to," I said, stepping forward. "She's been threatening homeowners, slapping them with fake violations, collecting fines she had no legal authority to issue. And when I stood up to her, she tried to ruin me. You're a liar," she shrieked, pointing at me like a preacher casting out demons. "You don't belong here. You people are leeches, freeloaders." That's when she lost the crowd. Even her loyal board members, who had always stood beside her with arms crossed and smug smiles, backed away. "You told us he was in violation," one of them said, stunned. "That we all were." Another woman, Linda, who'd once paid $8,000 to repaint her shutters, spoke up. "I want my money back." Deborah started yelling incoherently, flailing her arms, calling the officials corrupt, accusing me of forging documents. But no one was listening anymore. She didn't see the power slipping from her hands, but the rest of us did. Her voice cracked. Her knees wobbled. And then she stormed off, red-faced and trembling, practically sprinting to her SUV. The crowd didn't cheer, but they didn't need to. They saw the truth, and they weren't going to forget it. I figured Deborah might slink away after the barbecue disaster. Most people, when caught with their hands in the cookie jar, at least pretend to be embarrassed. Not her. She doubled down. The very next morning, I got a letter, hand-delivered and printed on HOA letterhead, claiming that, regardless of technical Exemptions. I was violating the aesthetic integrity and historical continuity of the community, and would still be held liable for all fees. Aesthetic integrity. My goats didn't appreciate that. That afternoon, she showed up at the end of my driveway again, this time with a clipboard and a scowl carved from stone. She stood just outside the fence, barking to anyone within earshot about precedents and how we can't let this hillbilly ruin what we've built. I guess she didn't realize two of the people she was yelling at were the county officials from the barbecue who happened to be driving by for follow-up measurements. Then came the real fireworks. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights off, but the badge didn't lie. Deputy Rollins stepped out, cool as you please, walked right up to Deborah and said, "Deborah Lane," she stiffened. "Yes, you're being served." He handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a court summons for harassment, trespassing, and attempted fraud, all backed by the evidence I'd been collecting for weeks. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "You can't be serious," she sputtered, grabbing at the papers like they might self-destruct. "I am the HOA. I have authority." Deputy Rollins didn't blink. "You had authority. That doesn't mean you had immunity." That's when the crowd started to gather. A few neighbors who had been silent for months stepped forward. One woman, Janice, a quiet widow who rarely left her porch, spoke up. "You made me repaint my whole house twice. Said my beige wasn't regulation sand. Cost me $4,200. Another man added, "You fined me $3,500 for a garden gnome." Deborah looked around, realizing the tide had turned. Her allies weren't standing behind her anymore. The HOA board members, who used to parrot her every word, kept their distance. Then Linda, sharp-eyed and fuming, spoke up. "I'm calling an emergency board vote. Effective immediately, I motion to suspend Deborah Lane from her position pending legal review." Another board member chimed in. Seconded. The vote passed unanimously. You could feel the power drain from her body like someone pulled the plug. "I have footage," I said, stepping forward and holding up my phone. "You want to see what she's been up to? Here's her walking on my land, ripping signs off my mailbox, screaming at my livestock. That barn she said was an eyesore?" She keyed it. The screen showed everything, grainy but clear. Trail cam footage, doorbell audio, Deborah's rants, her threats, her lies. She didn't wait for the end. Face blotchy and breath ragged, she turned, stomped to her SUV, slammed the door so hard the whole car shook, then peeled off down the road like a bat out of hell, her tailpipe puffing like a smoke signal of shame. No applause. No farewell. Just a puff of dust in her rearview mirror and a silence that tasted like victory. In the weeks after Deborah's meltdown, the neighborhood felt lighter. It was like someone had lifted a pressure valve that had been building for years. People started waving more, stopping to chat by the fence line. A few even brought pies and homemade jam as thank you gifts, said I did what they never had the guts to do. The lawsuit moved fast. Between the camera footage, my lawyers cease and desist, and half the neighborhood willing to testify, the court ordered Deborah to pay fines for trespassing, harassment, and misrepresentation of authority. She tried to claim ignorance, said she acted in good faith. The judge didn't buy a word of it. She was ordered to personally repay several neighbors, thousands of dollars in fines she'd fabricated over the years. Her house, which sat proudly in the middle of the Oak Ridge development like some sort of HOA castle, went on the market 6 weeks later. Word is she moved to Florida to start fresh. I doubt that HOA down there knows what's coming. As for the board, the HOA reorganized with new leadership. They narrowed their scope, clarified their legal boundaries, and even started refunding dues that had been collected unfairly. Linda, the same one who once defended Deborah, got elected president. First thing she did was send apology letters to everyone affected. I framed mine and hung it in the barn. The land. It's peaceful again. The goats are thriving. I painted the barn whatever color I damn well pleased. Forest green with a gold trim, just to spite the old regulation taupe nonsense Deborah used to drone on about. Sometimes I sit out on the porch in the evening, coffee in hand, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The air smells like hay and cedar, and the only sound is the wind and the low bleating of my goats. No screaming, no clipboard, no HOA, just peace and justice. A few of the neighbors from our alliance still stop by now and then. We talk, laugh, sometimes even work the land together. We're not just neighbors anymore, we're friends. A little community, not because of some paperwork, but because of mutual respect. Funny how Deborah thought she was protecting aesthetic standards. Turns out the best thing she ever did for the neighborhood was leaving it. A few months. After everything went down, I was out fixing a fence post when my phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "You'll love this," she wrote, followed by a link. It was a real estate listing, already marked sold. The address: a tidy, beige rancher in a Florida retirement community. Inside one of the most notoriously strict HOAs in the state, Deborah Lane's new kingdom. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my hammer. According to Linda, who still had contacts in the HOA circuit, Deborah had been forced to sell her Oak Ridge house to cover legal costs and restitution. The liens, the court fees, the ordered repayments, they gutted her. And where did she land? In a neighborhood where you could be fined for leaving your trash can out for more than 23 minutes. Where lawn height was checked by ruler. Where unregistered garden gnomes were actually a line item in the community rules. Poetic. Freaking justice. I thought about letting it go. Thought about taking the high road. But honestly, I couldn't resist. I went down to the local farm stand. Bought the finest fruit basket they had. Stuffed with Honeycrisp apples, figs, candied pecans, and a bottle of Hill Creek's best peach wine. Tucked inside, I included a laminated copy of my land deed, the part that clearly states, "Not subject to HOA governance," and a note, handwritten on crisp stationery. "Dear Deborah, thanks for the motivation. I rather enjoyed not being part of your HOA. Best wishes adjusting to your new community. Your favorite hillbilly." No return address. But I like to imagine her face when she opened it. Hell, maybe she'll try to fine me for the postage. Let her try.